Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. It has been 1 year since Israeli aggression on Gaza has killed over 41,000 innocent Palestinians, and of course, more than 90% of people in Gaza have been displaced for more than one time. As Israeli strikes and ground invasion continue, now the violence has spread beyond Gaza and into the region. Despite global pleas for ceasefire, the violence is continuing. In today's program, we will be looking at the past year, how this conflict that started with, of course, Hamas's attack on Israel and then Israel's retaliation on 8 October continued and is now taking the whole region into its grip. How the situation in the region has shifted over the past 1 year, we will be discussing in today's program, and the overwhelming question remains, when is this violence going to stop, or is there going to be a stop when we talk about this ongoing violence in the region? To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Sheharyar, who is analyst. Welcome to the program. We're joined online by Mr. Khalid, Taimur, Akram, who is foreign affairs expert. Welcome to the program. Sheharyar, let me start with you with the basic question. Of course, as the first anniversary of this war has approached, how do you look at, especially at the humanitarian crisis that has unfolded in this year?
So, Maryam, as we approach the 1 year anniversary of Israel's attack on Gaza, the unimaginable suffering of the Palestinian people, as well as now the Lebanese people, cannot be overstated on what these people have been suffering from when it comes to the humanitarian outlook from the region. Right now, the death toll that you mentioned of around 42,000, that's like coming from the ground, rescue efforts that are being done by, and a lot of like people basically call these the Hamas numbers. When it comes to international medical journals independently, they're basically saying that this death toll is over 100,000.
Yes, and some are stating over 180,000, which is a huge number.
So that's a huge devastation. This is just like dwarfs whatever is happening between Russia and Ukraine, which is like another issue. Other than that, if you talk about the health infrastructure of Gaza, that has been totally obliterated in this like whole act of aggression. When it comes to the humanitarian transport of like food, water, and other equipment that is like needed to sustain the IDPs of Gaza, all international organizations, especially the UN and various UN agencies, have repeatedly said that the Israeli forces are stopping those humanitarian aid to basically flow uninterrupted into Gaza. When it comes to IDP camps, which are protected under the international law, they have been consistently bombed by Israeli air forces without any question from the international community on how international law has been trampled over and over again in the last like 1 year.
Right. And let me take the same question to Mr. Khalid. Mr. Khalid, when we look at the devastation that has taken place in the past year, how do you see that when we look at from the lens of humanitarian angle? How do you see that the international perspective on this conflict has changed or evolved in this year?
Actually, if we see it since last 1 year, we have been seeing that the international community, especially the Western community, has not been playing their due role. And especially in last few months, we have seen the American side totally keeping quiet on these inhuman acts by Israel because of the American elections. I've been saying at number of platforms that right now the American government and all the political parties are looking towards the election on 9th of November, which is due to be held just in over a month's time. And we can see that the Israelis on the same time, they are trying very hard to take all the revenge, whatever they feel like from Hamas and all other stakeholders in the region. Uh, I foresee this thing that in next 30 days, the Israeli attacks are going to be very, very intense, and the humanitarian aid is going to be very, very less because uh, as we as we see that many of the humanitarian organizations, including United Nations, has been unable to stop Israelis from this aggression. Although the International Court of Justice has also issued verdicts against Israel, but they cannot be implemented because the West is not ready to listen to them. I view that these kind of activities from Israeli side will be more intense in next 30 days because whatever ceasefire is going to happen in Gaza, whatever ceasefire agreement is going to happen now, it's going to happen after the American elections.
Right, right. And of course, that is a very grim situation when we talk about this, Sheharyar, and specifically when we talk about this humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in the past 1 year. How do you see that? What is the long-term look for infrastructure in Gaza, where we see that more than 70% of buildings, hospitals have already been destroyed?
Well, Maryam, when it comes to reconstruction, I think that conversation is still in the nascent stages. When it comes to the situation on ground, I think the conflict is expanding. It is expanding beyond the borders of Israel, beyond the borders of Gaza, and it is spilling over now. And we've done various programs in the past discussing this exact development that we were afraid that this might spill over into the rest of the region.
The potential risks that,
and that risk has now been realized now that the conflict has now engulfed Lebanon as well. And now other than the fact that this conflict should have gone towards some sort of mitigation, the Netanyahu government and the war cabinet has included further objectives into their whole condition of ceasefire, and that is basically to bring the Israeli citizens back to the north of Israel,
right,
and to basically cut off any support that is coming to the Palestinian people through Hezbollah, and how they are basically managing or supporting the the freedom movement that is taking place in Gaza.
Right.
So other than that, we also know that recently the Iranian side also made a statement by releasing over 200 ballistic missiles that basically were attacking critical military infrastructure in Israel as a warning of what things could be looking like after unprovoked aggression by the Israeli side, in which they basically attacked various Hamas leaders as well. They also attacked and killed the leader of the Hezbollah as well. So this aggression from the Israeli side goes to basically show that they want this whole conflict to expand. And before the American elections take place, which are also coming up in the next few months, they want this whole war to expand and engulf and generally to provoke Iran, so that this war can be expanded to include Iran as well.
Right, right.
So this is a very horrific development that we are witnessing right now in the Middle East, and if the Netanyahu cabinet and their team is not stopped, even President Macron a few days ago basically gave this statement that now to basically control this conflict, they have to stop arms sales to Gaza. And that was a big statement coming from France, because it's a very influential member of the European Union, and even they basically are feeling the pressure that this whole conflict will engulf not just the Middle East, but the repercussions will also be felt in the European Union as well.
Right, right.
And obviously President Macron also had to qualify this statement a few days later after Prime Minister Netanyahu attacked even his long-term ally France by saying that this whole statement that was given by President Macron was, he basically used very undiplomatic words for him.
Right.
And then Macron had to come up and qualify why he basically said this statement. So this also goes to show that even though there is a lot of resistance developing in European Union and various Western capitals against this war. When it comes to providing diplomatic support and arms support by various Western nations, that support is still being provided.
Of course, and this raises a lot
Israel.
of questions
And it raises a
regarding
lot
the
of
situation.
questions
Of
on
course.
what the intentions actually are on ground.
Right. And of course, with escalation in the conflict, Mr. Khalid, how do you see this situation, and why has international community failed to do anything about it, especially with reports emerging of potential and of course there are evidence of genocide in Gaza?
Well, I would say that international community, in their limited capacity, have been trying to play their role. We have seen China talking at various international platforms. We had seen Russia talking at various platforms. We had seen OIC giving statements and United Nations giving statements. But the actual work had to be done by the Americans and the European Union. But unfortunately, we had seen Americans taking a back seat, and mainly because this is the election year in USA. Israel, as we know, that if they have to listen or if they have to accept any kind of mediation, it is going to be a Western mediation, and they are not going to accept any kind of mediation by Middle East or by China or by any other country. As far as China is concerned, we have seen that China has been playing a very important role. They have got together all the 14 factions of the resistance movement in Palestine, and for the first time all the factions, they got together, and China wanted that if there is any kind of peace deal, so it should be a wholesome peace deal by all the stakeholders of Palestine. As far as America is concerned, I had told you previously also that since it's the election year, and initially President Joe Biden was taking a lot of interest. We had seen in May and June, we had seen that there was a draft peace accord which had come into the limelight, but then we saw President Joe Biden leaving the presidential race, and after that we have seen him not taking that much of interest in any kind of peace deal. Although the American Secretary of State had been going to various Middle Eastern countries and European countries to talk about a peace deal, but there is no solid peace deal or draft till now which can be deliberated upon.
It still remains a question mark, of course. Of course, and to discuss more about it, we are now joined in the studios by former Special Secretary Foreign Affairs, Ms. Naeela Chohan. Welcome to the program. When we look at this escalation in the past 1 year, how do you see, especially from the perspective of humanitarian crisis that has been unfolding, and when we look at the number of displaced people in Gaza and now in Lebanon, how do you see this is going to be impacting the neighboring countries?
Well, there are two aspects to what you have asked. The humanitarian situation, we don't have words to express, and it is not only terrible as it is, but it is escalating. The situation is getting from bad to worse, and it is deliberately being done. Israel is not allowing humanitarian assistance to even reach Gaza, and therefore you have children dying of malnutrition. So they are starving. Not only they are killing, those they are not killing, they are killing by bullets, they are killing them by starvation, and it's totally merciless. Israel is now escalating the war. They have started attacking Lebanon now. Although in 2020 they were beaten by Hezbollah, they had to retreat because their ground forces are not as capable as the Hezbollah militias are. So they had been using aerial bombing first to create that terror, to create that destruction, and then they decided to send ground forces, and you must have heard.
Right. But when we look at the situation, there are reports that now Israeli troops are exhausted from this prolonged conflict. but still Israel is willing to go beyond, of course, its initial objectives of targeting Hamas, and now it is going to target other areas in the region as well. Do you think extremist ideologies within Israel are one of the reasons behind this prolonged conflict?
Definitely, you have to understand the Israeli political system. Likud party is now, the ruling party with Netanyahu as its leader. They are extreme right, and they are being supported by other extreme right parties in Israel. So their agenda is not just Gaza, it's not just Lebanon. If you had noted the map that Netanyahu had shown in the United Nations
of Greater Israel,
he is basically pursuing that agenda. So let us not be misled by the idea that this is just Gaza or Palestine or Lebanon or Hezbollah or Hamas. No, his agenda is much bigger, and in that map you could see there is no Palestine, it's all Israel.
But what is the significance of ICJ and ICC's findings when we talk about in the context of all these, of course, his speeches, Netanyahu's speeches, and the war crimes and genocide that is happening within the region?
The significance is great. Let me assure you that. Implementation might take time, because you see, this is a very cleverly chosen time. As you know, in United States of America, they are just a few weeks away from their elections, and there is a lobby party called APEC, which is American Israeli lobby. They are putting in $100 million into their elections. So no politician would have the courage to criticize Israel at this point, because they are more interested in their votes, in their seats, rather than taking a higher moral stand. And you can see how President Biden has been taking U-turns upon U-turns upon U-turns. Coming to Iran, Iran was very patient, and if you noted the speech by President Pezeshkian at the UN, he had mentioned for the first time that Israel has to be condemned, of course, but Iran is willing to speak to the West, and they are wanting to revive JCPOA. Now, JCPOA basically constrains Iran's nuclear plan. It is not to encourage them, but to constrain them, and that was vetoed by President Trump. And since then, JCPOA has not progressed. So now Israel is talking about attacking Iranian nuclear assets. But Iran has basically shown to the world that the myth Israel had created about its invincibility, about its dome of defense, is shallow, that it's just bluff, because Iranian missiles penetrated the dome of defense, and they targeted military installations. They did not attack civilians, to show that Iran is not interested in killing civilians, unlike Israel. Israel is wanting to kill the civilian population because they want to eliminate them, to be able to assimilate them as part of Greater Israel. So the agendas are different.
Right, right. And Sheharyar, when we look at this situation and of course the accusations of genocide on Israel are gaining traction during the past 1 year, how do you see it has isolated Israel when we compare it to the situation a year back?
So when we basically look at what the situation on ground is after 1 year of Israeli aggression, there are like two things that are emerging. One, that Israeli military dominance stays, and they are expanding their military capacity beyond Israel into Gaza, and also like now expanding into other countries. When it comes to the international support that Israel once enjoyed, that support is now dwindling. A lot of like European countries, a lot of like historical allies of Israel, they're distancing themselves. So the global isolation of Israel is increasing by the day. When it comes to the whole genocide rhetoric, that has also already been established by the International Court of Justice. They have already basically said that they have enough evidence to basically qualify this whole act as an act of genocide. So that discussion is also like now in the mainstream. If Israel doesn't agree with it, or their main backer, the US, basically supports diplomatically Israel on whatever, and Madam has very eloquently described how the whole Israeli lobby basically controls the whole political process of the US. Right now, it would be very ambitious to basically think that the US, which is the main backer of Israel, would basically have any out of the box solutions. They tried various different models of ceasefire.
Right, but when we look at, like you are mentioning too, of course, Anthony Blinken's back and forth visits within the region, but at the same time, when we look at weapon supply to Israel, that is still continuing. And now there are legal challenges when we are looking at different countries. They are emerging now with regards to weapon supply to Israel. Do you think this is going to be changing of course, the direction in which the conflict is going in the coming days?
So I just mentioned that President Macron has also basically given a call that the arms sales to Israel need to be stopped. Other than that, if you look at
and that
Germany,
is significant because France was one of the first few countries that backed Israel.
Definitely. Even after that, President Macron had to qualify his statement by basically saying that France stands with Israel when it comes to its defense. And they basically said that the fact that Israel is using unprecedented firepower, this is degrading their international reputation. That is the stance that Macron had to take after giving this statement. Other than that, if you look at Germany, they have stopped the transfer of equipment and ammunition. When it comes to UK, now there are calls, and they are also selectively giving them ammunition and support. So these were historical, very close allies of Israel, which are kind of changing their stance, due to pressure mounting as well from the International Court of Justice and also their local populations. Even yesterday, there was a huge demonstration in various different capitals of Europe that are basically calling for now dual ceasefire in Gaza as well as now Lebanon. Historically, France has very close ties to Lebanon. The second language that Lebanese speak is French, and even due to the fact that Lebanon is already going through a massive financial crisis as well, the collapse of that state is now very inevitable.
And not to forget the political instability.
Political instability, economic instability, and they haven't even recovered from the financial crisis as well as the COVID crisis. And France has a lot of stakes, and France is supporting Lebanon when it comes to the financial revival. And a lot of as I mentioned, a lot of Lebanese people speak French as their second language. So President Macron, even he had to take a very tough stance against Israeli aggression.
Right, and Mr. Khalid, when we look at this situation, of course, a number of efforts for ceasefire have been made during the past few months and since the escalation of the conflict. But in your opinion, what lessons can be learned from those, of course, failed attempts for ceasefire? And how do you see, what are the main obstacles? Is it Netanyahu's leadership that is, of course, refusing to accept any ceasefire deal?
Yes, first of all, we have to say that these ceasefire attempts were made by whom? These ceasefire attempts were made by some countries and some stakeholders in Middle East. The ceasefire attempts were made by United Nations. The ceasefire attempts were made by the neighboring countries. The ceasefire attempts were made by OIC. So all these are not, the Israel is not listening to all these stakeholders, because if Israel had to listen to these stakeholders, they could have listened in last 1 year. Yes, it is about the leadership of the current president of Israel, because he also knows this thing that if he abruptly stops this war, then it is going to be the end of his career, because right now he is at the lowest edge of ebb of his political career. For him, a decisive action in the war and decisive action in the shape of sending all the Palestinians out of Gaza, taking full control of Gaza, colonization of Gaza, expanding Israeli territory into Lebanese territory, or attacking Iran. So these kinds of things, till the time he will not achieve, he feels that his political career is at stake. So right now, it is this war has two dimensions. One, the internal Israeli dimension, in which the president and his cabinet feels that they have to show a solid progress to their countrymen to stay in the political arena. And second is the US angle, in which the Israeli diaspora, which plays a very prominent role in the US business circles, and they are one of the major donors in the US election. So they are also hindering any kind of peace deal, and they feel that till the time tangible results are not achieved by Israelis, this war will continue.
Right, and look, when we talk about tangible results, of course, how do you see Netanyahu's strategy regarding the conflict? Is there an end game to it, or this is an open-ended conflict for Netanyahu?
No, Netanyahu's agenda is very clear. He wants to establish Greater Israel, and he will not stop until he has achieved that. And you could see his audacity. He has the audacity to call UN Secretary General persona non grata. I mean, that's the limit. And anybody who criticizes, when the president of Brazil criticized, he called him, President Lula was called persona non grata. So Israel is not going to stop until it's a
Right, right. And Sheharyar, when we talk about, of course, Netanyahu's, of course, political strategy and his military strategy regarding expansion of the conflict, what role, in your opinion, Israeli public opinion has played in this, in expanding the conflict?
So, Maryam, they're like, after this like 1 year anniversary of Israel's aggression, there are like a few illusions that now need to be broken. Illusion number one is that the Israeli public is against Netanyahu. All the various polls, and this I'm minusing the families that are basically asking for the hostages to come back. Those families apart, most of the Israeli public stands in line with what Netanyahu is doing. His public opinion in regards to various polls that they have conducted, he is becoming more popular. His expansion into Lebanon is supported. His operations against Hezbollah have been supported, and his operations against Hamas and not accepting a ceasefire, they are also being supported by the public. So let's like get that illusion out of the window that the Israeli public is not in support of Netanyahu. That's a major illusion that a lot of like I see analysts basically speaking, but like the evidence from ground is very different. The other illusion was Netanyahu's illusion that he basically thought that while being in government, and this I'm talking the events that led to October 7, his illusion was that he would be able to go on as business as usual without giving the Palestinians the right to self-determination. And he said that internationally he is like so diplomatically connected, and Israel has such a strong lobby in the West that they would be able to ignore this issue and basically manage this issue without giving the Palestinians any right to self-determination. That was Netanyahu's illusion that was broken on October 7th. Then when we talk about the grand bargain that the US was basically propagating and getting a lot of like countries from the Middle East to accept Israel, and in return the Israelis would basically pave a path to the self-determination of the Palestinian state. That was the myth or the illusion that the Americans were basically supporting, and that illusion was also broken because Netanyahu consistently at that time, and even after October 7th, he has been very vocal that Israelis would never accept a two-state solution. Now Netanyahu and various influential members of his party and cabinet have consistently said that there will not be a two-state solution at all.
Right,
So
right.
that was also a myth.
And when we look at this situation, like Sheharyar alluded to, that of course Israeli public is behind Netanyahu, but at the same time we know that GCC countries that were moving towards having diplomatic relations with Israel are now backed off from the initial standing, and this has led to international isolation of Israel. How do you see this is going to be impacting, specifically when we talk about economic, political consequences for Israel in the coming days or maybe in the coming year?
Well, Sheharyar has broken a few myths. I would like to further break myths that Israeli economy is now in shambles because of expanding its war and continuing to do so.
A lot of its ports have been impacted, they are
Exactly.
going bankrupt.
And it was said that China is not an important player. China is one of the largest trading partners of Israel. So, if China puts its foot down, USA's support to Israel would then be impacted. And Netanyahu is audacious, he is almost impudent, and he is trying to pretend that it's all hunky-dory, and his people are supporting him. I would like to add to what Sheharyar said, that it is true that there is not a very big lobby against him, but I think within Israel also there is lot of naming and shaming going on. So, there are people who are criticizing Netanyahu's approach, not because they do not want expansion, not because they respect Palestinians, but because they are being exposed. They were supposedly victims and now they are victimizing. So, their whole persona in the international community of being victims of Holocaust and all the atrocities that were committed by Germany in World War II is now being replicated in a worse form by the Jews to the to the Palestinians. So, their whole image is in shambles now, and that is what is creating a reaction from the Jewish diaspora abroad, if not within Israel. But as far as their agenda is concerned, they are thinking of taking the whole land of Hazrat Ibrahim, which means Iraq, which means Egypt, which means parts of Saudi Arabia, which means Yemen, which means Syria, which means Lebanon, and parts of Turkey. How far are they going to go?
Right. And lastly, very briefly tell us, do you think this is going to be the beginning of the Zionist project of Israel, or do you think Israel is going to continue its dominance when we look at the coming days or months or year?
Zionist agenda from day one was this, but it was kept secret. Now it's open. So, as far as Zionism is concerned, that is to have a greater Israel, and that agenda is being pursued. But I agree with Sheharyar that there is a growing isolation of Israel. And although USA said we are not going to give them more arms, but the already arms agreement they have with Israel is valid till 2028. For next 4 years, they will continue to give them arms, even if they decide not to continue with this arms supply to them. Now, how Iran is going to react? Today is the anniversary of this atrocity that Israel started under the pretext that Hamas had attacked them. Hamas was already under attack by Israel, and this 7th October broke many myths that Israel had created for itself.
Of course, and brought Palestine issue again into international light.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Ms. Naeela Chohan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid, Taimur, Akram, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we look at the situation in Gaza and beyond, Israel's aggression is continuing. And this is the time more than ever that international community need to do more for not only peace within Middle East but beyond as well. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care.